Now I have the honor of talking about another amazing transformative leader who is with me today to accept the John Gardner Leadership Award. John Gardner, for those of you who don't know, is the founder of Independent Sector, who is hosting and putting on Upswell, a 40-year-old organization. And he was grounded in a set of profound values about individual and societal transformation being intimately linked. And that when we did both, we got a humanizing, just, and loving world. And so this award is awarded each year to a leader from the nonprofit community who models these values and drives transformation and mobilizes other people, unifies them, helps engage and transform and hold accountable institutions to improve the quality of life of those on the margins that then serve everyone and our planet. So before I go into a full introduction of Fatima, I want to play a short clip that illustrates her impact and the impact of her organization. This is Fatima speaking at the National Women's Law Center Annual Gala in November 2019.
The year after the Civil War ended, the women of this nation gathered in New York City for the 11th National Women's Convention. A woman named Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a poet and an activist, took the stage. She preached, "I say then that justice is not fulfilled so long as women is unequal before the law." She continued, "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity." Frances, a Black woman, said those words just months after our people were freed. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity. What faith, what hope, what wisdom, what a vision for justice for us to carry out and to carry on. So today, let us remember, if we want to build a more perfect union, we have to build it together. We have to show up over and over and over again for women, for girls, for immigrants, for people with disabilities, for everyone who is facing discrimination, for all of us.
So with that, I would like to extend on behalf of the audience with us today, a heartfelt congratulations to you, Fatima, for the John W. Gardner Leadership Award in this year, 2020, a memorable year indeed. Before I engage in a conversation with Fatima and really get her wisdom out into the virtual space that we're living in, I want to do a little bit of background for you all. So Fatima Goss Graves is the president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center and has a distinguished track record working across a broad set of issues central to women's lives, including income insecurity, health and reproductive rights, education access, and workplace fairness. She is also among the co-founders of the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, an initiative that aims to help workers connect with lawyers and bring cases of workplace sexual harassment and related retaliation, regardless of industry, rank, or role. As our country and our sector confronts the devastating impact of gender inequality and systemic racism, I can't think of a better person to honor at this time for her commitment to advancing justice and the issues that are vital to the lives of women and girls, particularly Black, Native, and women and girls of color. So Fatima, welcome. It is thrilling. You and I have had a couple of opportunities to connect, and it's each time I get more excited. So I'd just love to start with kind of human. How are you feeling about this award? What's running through your mind?
Well, I mean, this is obviously just a huge honor. It's a testament to the work of the National Women's Law Center. I am so lucky to lead a really amazing team of dedicated and talented folks who are really built for these times. And I think it speaks to the work of the gender justice movement in these times. And I feel really grateful for this honor. So thank you.
Well, you stand in a long line of extraordinary leaders. And through our Upswell pop-ups, I've had the opportunity to talk to Angela Glover-Blackwell and Roseanne Haggerty and Sherry Solwell Black, really just remarkable leaders in their own right. And one of the questions that we constantly engage with is, what about your own upbringing has most impacted you, and how it affects how you show up as a leader today?
Well, you've named many of my personal sheroes, so I should just say that. There's a couple of things. I come from a very close and sort of big family, sort of big as in a couple dozen cousins, big family. And my family is really grounded in values that go back to service and community. And it's a family that has always loved and celebrated our Blackness and has had a lot of pride in our family stories. I went to law school in part because of one of our family stories. My father and his siblings were the plaintiffs in a case that desegregated the Knoxville, Tennessee public schools. And so when I think about service and work, I always think about the stories of my family and the lessons that I learned from my parents. My mother had a life of service, and my sisters too. And so I just, I think my work at the National Women's Law Center always will be grounded in the values and ideas and lessons I learned from a very young age.
It is not uncommon in these conversations when I ask folks about what they draw on. And it are these models, sometimes in our families, sometimes mentors, some set of adults. And I heard Terrence in his remarks talking about, the focus on Lester and that being his legacy to his children and to the people he works in. The other thing that I've found fascinating in my conversations is each of these leaders, for themselves and for their colleagues, have some kind of way of rejuvenating, of recentering. This work is hard and it knocks us off our games in ways that no matter how seasoned we are, we find ourselves like, an incoming, I didn't see this one. So how do you do that? How do you do that for your organization?
I think I had practices in place, and 2020 has been sort of the test of any practice that you've had, because there has been nothing easy about this time, right? Every time we think that we feel like, okay, maybe we've adjusted to this. Maybe I've adjusted to working and parenting and homeschooling and leading in this time. There's another surprise. I mean, I think the last month has really showed us that. So, for me, I ground myself in a few things. Definitely in my family, one of the remarkable upsides is about COVID is that we're spending time together differently, using technology, using Zoom to be together in different ways. And I really look forward to those times. I also ground myself in a little bit of sort of fitness as I release, and I have been more diligent about that. But as an organization, we have been playing with a range of ways to sort of deal with the multiple pandemics people have been facing. COVID, the recognition and uprising around racism. Most of our staff, almost a third, have young children, but most of our staff have children. And so there's a care crisis. And so we have been playing with a range of ways to give ourselves space, thinking space, time, but also a reminder that we are grounded in a really clear purpose. The work that we are doing right now is the work that can impact folks really for a generation. And sometimes the thing that helps get you through is that clarity of purpose, knowing why you are here.
So just a little follow on to that. So in the conversations, and certainly in my own experience, when I lose that connection to purpose, things begin to kind of go cattywampus. What is it you do for yourself and for the organization? Do you stop them and kind of literally read the values, or is there some other practice that you do? It's just so hard these days.
Well, I will tell you, one of the things I find hard is doing all of this virtually, right? We are the sort of culture where people stop by each other's offices, where there's a lot of gathering in person. And so I will say that piece is tough, but we're thinking a lot about what this looks like, especially as we move into the end of the year and following the election. There's a need to reground ourselves. And so some of the ways I've been thinking about that is through reading, right? Reading both reflective work around the times that we're experiencing now, but also doing some historical reading and grounding ourselves in those who have done this work before us. These are tough, tough times, but we are certainly not the first generation to experience tough times. When I think about the foundation of the civil rights movement, of the gender justice movement, this was not happening through easy times. It wasn't that people were like, this seems like fun, let me do it. It was purposeful struggle for change, for a different future for all of us. And so some historical reading, and also ideating together, right? One of the things that we have had to do over and over again in this pandemic is adjust our plans, and even getting that muscle together of understanding that external forces may change what you thought you knew to be true, what you thought you planned to do. That practice work together is and will make us stronger. But I'm not going to lie, there is nothing easy about it.
Not surprising given who you are, we've had a set of conversations with the Nobel Peace Prize women that people can find on Upswell on demand. And to a person, they talk exactly in line with what you're saying, that there is a self-care, there's organizational care, and there is the constant adaptation to changing circumstances in the face of real resistance, whether it's from a pandemic or from society, from norms, from culture, from the structures. And the constant enlivening and building of that sense of connectedness to justice. So I'd love to, my next question really is, what are the opportunities right now that we have for this kind of moving forward? We're in a moment where systems and structures seem to be flexible and hopefully malleable. So, where do you see the opportunities?
Well, sometimes the sort of disruption that we're experiencing allows us to have totally new conversations, and that is an opportunity. The care crisis that we are facing in this country has brought to light the deep inequities in our system, how fragile our care infrastructure has always been, and the possibility of actually transforming things so that we can create a system that understands that care is foundational to our economy, to work, and to families, that we can have a system that doesn't thrive off of paying largely women of color workforce poverty wages to get by, that it is made something totally new possible. I'd also say that right now, the movement for Black Lives is pushing all of us. It's pushing all of us to think beyond what maybe we thought was possible. It's challenging the narratives we thought to be true. And that has been really, really exciting to me. And I also will say that it's been exciting to see young people in particular take the stage in really interesting ways, putting their ideas on the table, taking the streets in really inspiring ways. I feel like, it's no accident that over the last few years, in the midst of so much uprising, we've had really important cultural reckonings that have matched. And the cultural reckoning that we are having on race in this country right now, I think will help us over the long haul. And because today is October 15th, and it is actually the anniversary, the 3-year anniversary of Me Too going viral, I don't think it's an accident that the cultural reckoning on gender-based violence, on sexual violence, comes amidst the cultural reckonings on race. And I think the two stand to undo a lot of systemic harm.
It's a lot, and powerful. Could we just wind back a little bit, and your read on this extraordinary youth-driven breakthrough, and both the tension with the generations, I'll throw myself in that, the older generations, which were really built around incrementalism. With you won by these Ruth Bader Ginsburg kind of each, step by step, and you just keep pressure. And all of a sudden, many of us have been put back on our heels to say, maybe incrementalism isn't the right approach, particularly at this moment. How are you navigating this? You kind of bridge generations, and you've been driving, but you're a lawyer, right? And you're a policy expert. You know how systems work and what it takes. How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, so I will challenge one thing you said, because I think that people often describe Justice Ginsburg as an incrementalist. And certainly her legal strategy of selecting specific cases that sort of pulled at the strings of the misogyny that was embedded in our law, that was incremental. But if you think about what she was doing at the time, it was audacious, right? It was audacious to imagine that the Constitution, which had not said that women were equal under the Constitution, would actually say it. So that big goal, that big, audacious, dramatic goal that there was gender equality embedded in our foundational documents, that was huge, right? And she did it at a time where our cultural conversations were already there. And so when I think about the reckonings that are happening right now, I am always reminded and inspired that young people are telling us and guiding us culturally where our laws and policies will drag behind. And so I never see it as my job to get in the way of the powerful and deep cultural narratives that are happening. I feel like that's a pulse that I want to be close to. In my head, I'm always the next gen person, but I'm realizing that, I lead an organization that has multiple generations, and acknowledge that, I'm not a millennial or a zennial or whatever the right term is, but I am clear that we need to listen deeply to what those folks are saying. And I see the job of the National Women's Law Center of moving and shaping legal and policy strategies to match that cultural reality. We can't just be some disconnected group that takes a case we find interesting. It needs to align with where our movement is taking us.
So I just have to, reason number 7,342,000, why you're getting this award, this kind of architecture of what you just said, that around systemic change. So we've heard from many of our main stage speakers that we as individuals have to operate differently. We're in a culture or in subsystems, and then there are structures. What you just said, and please push back, is that those of us working on systems work actually have a powerful leadership responsibility to pay attention to cultural zeitgeist of change and align our structural strategies to harness the full energy of that zeitgeist, and then to be really smart and strategic about how that structural change will pull the momentum of the culture along. Did I get that right?
That is true. That is much better said, in fact. And I would add that we have really a responsibility to be connected to movement, to be connected to networks. And that doesn't always happen, right? So you have to, on purpose, make it happen. If I am doing work and the Law Center is building a strategy on what should happen next on Title IX, the law that bans sex discrimination in education, we need to be spending our time in deep community and conversation with student survivors who are advocating and using totally different tools, right? Like, we cannot be disconnected from those conversations. And that doesn't mean, and I should say that, sometimes tension arises because sometimes there are real and meaningful limits to our legal tools. There are real and meaningful limits to policy, especially at the federal level, right? I know what those levers are, and they don't extend everywhere they need to extend, right? So what looks like incremental might be a strategy that is building towards a longer arc, a bigger future, that longer dream. You just have to know that you're both heading in the same direction to know if your case, if your policy is gonna lead you on the right path.
Super helpful. And I think you've actually, not surprisingly, really contributed the narrative of what we're interrogating during Upswell. How do these pieces hold? And this balancing act, particularly for leaders, to remain connected. We heard Terrence saying the same thing, this notion of proximate and engaged and open and seeing community, while also bringing the full weight of our capacity to move systems. And that sometimes is a disconnect in pace. So I want to just flag for those of us who are joining us, please, questions, comments, thoughts, please send them in. I've got a feed here that we'll synthesize. I'll try and do both, and I've got some folks backing us up here. But I have a couple other questions that I would love to just ask. First of all, so this Me Too moment, and we're celebrating the third year anniversary. You've been part of this Me Too vote movement, and this notion of enfranchising voice and enfranchising power and enfranchising women power. Talk us a little bit about that work.
Yeah, 3 years ago, the longtime movement that was led by my sister in the work, Tarana Burke, Me Too went viral, and a remarkable public storytelling and public sharing conversation around sexual violence emerged. People shared their stories, their pain and their trauma, really, with the hope that important things would happen. And if I have a critique, it is not for survivors who have come forward again and again and kept this movement going. It's for our institutions that haven't changed fast enough. So one of the things that Tarana, together with Monica Ramirez, who leads Justice for Migrant Women, and Aijin Pu, who leads the National Domestic Workers Alliance, we came together and started to think about, how do we shift this to think about survivors as a power force, as constituents, as people who know and understand what they want and are making demands. And so that worked together. A few weeks ago, we had the first Survivor Summit and released an agenda, which was exciting to do virtually. We had over 12,000 people tuning in. And it was crowdsourced from survivors themselves. And as we think about leading into this election, but well beyond this one single moment, what we really are seeking is for survivors to be taken seriously as a force for change.
So, going back again, linking the conversation we heard with Terrence, trauma is so delicate, both individually and collectively. How do you personally manage, kind of a legal and advocacy strategy with this kind of solidarity and journeying with folks and being a force for the healing that is so critical?
One of the things about sharing stories, whether it's stories of sexual violence or the stories that people are experiencing right now during COVID. I was watching the Supreme Court hearing this morning, and there was a remarkable woman who told her abortion story. Storytellers sort of give us all a gift, right? A gift of their personal experience that humanizes sort of the data and research that's out there. And with that gift, there is a deep responsibility that comes with it, both to provide platforms and spaces for them to tell their stories, but also to treat their stories with dignity and to match that with effective responses. So when I think about the work of the National Women's Law Center, we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we provide vehicles and space and opportunities for people to share their stories. But we understand that they are storytellers, but they are activists, they are experts, and they are contributing in extraordinarily important ways. And so how do we partner with them to bring their stories to light and to develop campaigns and policies and approaches that are actually tracking what they're doing? And you know, my friend Tarana talks about like that there's healing in activism. I totally agree with that. That for many of us, doing the work, transforming society, that is sort of a form of healing. And so we included that in the survivor agenda, a whole strategy around healing justice.
It is one of the great human paradoxes that our repairing of the world can be so healing to our own lives. It's such a powerful reality. Thank you. We have got some questions coming in, so not light or easy, but given who you are, my guess is you'll be fine. So the first question is, how do you navigate the polarization of many women's issues in today's polarized political climate?
You know, it's interesting. When a lot of issues that we work on at the National Women's Law Center are actually pulled across gender, even across political party, they're extraordinarily popular. Things like equal pay, extraordinarily popular. Things like access to childcare and access to healthcare, hugely popular. Reproductive healthcare, including abortion care. More than 70% of people do not want Roe versus Wade to be overturned. And I say that because there's real distance between the popularity and cultural understanding that people have and the power disparities that we're seeing right now, right? And so because it seems like there's a range of our rights that are under threat, it might make it seem like these must be polarizing topics that people don't agree on, or that there isn't wide agreement. And so one of the things that I actually think is really, really important is actually telling the true story of where people are on these issues, that is a part of the destigmatizing of the range of gender justice issues that we work on. And I guess the other thought I have around this is that it is the case that we are in a moment that probably feels disruptive to people, that there probably feels like there's a lot of change that's happening all at once. Their understanding of race and gender and violence, what it was 5 years ago, things that seemed okay, maybe they don't seem okay right now, and that's uncomfortable. And what I just want to offer is that sometimes discomfort is a good thing. It means that we're changing for the better, and I would rather stay a little uncomfortable, a little uncertain, but do good in the world over the long haul, and I think we can handle it.
Again, thank you for the wisdom. I think it is spot on. I want to go back to this notion of polarization. What I heard and I want to make sure I'm clear, is that what I heard you say around particularly women's issues is there's actually, if we can pull ourselves out from the signaling that puts us in our camps, we find that there is a great deal of commitment and energy moving forward. So part of the work, it sounds like, is to try and depoliticize the language that then have people retreating into camps versus leaning forward and trying to figure out the pathway forward. So if I got that right, I'm curious. So you're a powerful advocate and you've unleashed advocacy in a really powerful way. So how do you navigate that tension of common value alignment while also being a super savvy political leader who has very clear capability of creating systemic change?
Well, one of the things I think we have to do is distinguish politicians from people. Right now, politicians are leaning into old frames, old ideas that aren't serving them well and aren't actually serving their people well. But when you're actually able to talk directly to people and hear their stories and talk to them about the solutions that would transform their lives, and spend less time in the frame or box that politicians are offering, I think you do better. And some of that is even having the power of language, right? For many, many years, we have worked on things like raising wages for workers. We've worked on things like allowing for people to work with safety and dignity, advocating for things like paid leave. And in the pandemic, we finally have the language of essential, an understanding that the workers who are paid the least in this country are actually the most essential to our ability to function. That power of language has opened up a totally new opportunity to circumvent the box that politicians sometimes put us in. And I think there's a lot to learn from that about where we need to go in the future.
Yeah. It's a powerful leadership challenge that we actually, we elect politicians and that they often then use language to kind of box us in to their strategy, as opposed to holding the language and the framing for us and really advocating that they conform to the value set and not use it to divide us in many regards. Another question has come in. Where do you see the justice system, activism, and leadership in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, that is kind of the question. I believe right now. I'm talking to you in the midst of a Supreme Court hearing that is totally unprecedented, right? It's totally unprecedented in that it's happening weeks before an election. It's totally unprecedented that it was in part held on Zoom because it was so unsafe to happen. And I am worried. I will just be very, very frank. I am worried that if they vote on the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett before the election, that the Supreme Court itself will not recover fully. And so what that looks like in terms of how we think about the courts in the future, how we think about justice, how we understand that we can meaningfully rely on these institutions in the same way, I am not sure. I think that we're going to have a period of time where there is major conversations around stabilizing our democracy, right? And I think activism is core to that. Activism is core to holding our electeds accountable, and it is core to expressing what people want and need. And I think through all of this, we will see leaders emerging in a whole bunch of different ways, including people you would never have predicted, that will do things like bring us together as a country, that will lead with the sort of positivity and hope. And I love Terrence's leading with love. I often actually say that and remind myself about the possibility of leading with love, to get us through. But we are about to enter, I think, a pretty vulnerable time in the history of our country.
And so, to the activists who are essential to our future, some wisdom. You've been at this a while. You clearly, this award is merely a recognition of what was about your life, an incredible set of contributions. Um, you know, we read a lot, we're pulled left and right on activism. What is your advice to the activists that are critical at this moment?
Well, I'm still learning a lot from activists every day. And I've seen a bunch of different types of activism. You've seen people in the streets and organizing others to the streets, but also first time marchers this summer who were moved. But we've also seen different configurations. I saw around school reopenings, teachers and parents joining together in common cause and being activists in that way. We've seen the power of social media. And I think when I think about how I use social media, and then I think about younger generations and the many exciting, interesting ways that they're able to get a message out, connect with people, and transform culture, I feel like I'm going to constantly be in learning mode. But if I were going to offer a piece of advice, and that is to keep gathering. Sometimes you don't even know what will come of joining together, but gathering and gathering again and being with your people produces beautiful things. And it's a thing that I worry about deeply in a time where we're all looking at each other through computer screens, but it is so, so important to driving a different future.
Again, just this themes between you and Terrence around human connection, and that is an accelerator for our ability to kind of find common purpose. I'm going to read something that just came in. I think it's real time. So a few months ago, ACO was accosted by a Republican congressman on the steps of the Capitol. With our president caught on tape disparaging women, what can we do as a nation to ensure that the future leaders of our country exhibit respect for women, especially since young people look up to them and they are supposed to be role models? Your work at the center is phenomenal. There's a second question, but that's a big one.
That is a big question. I mean, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, this is a sitting congresswoman who was accosted in those terms. And I think when I see her and what she has endured, we joined together with a number of organizations to push back on the sort of racist and sexist tropes that were being levied towards Senator Kamala Harris. We are in a time when it can be really difficult to see the most powerful women in our society subjected to what kind of feels like the everyday treatment for other women, right? And I thought what the Congresswoman did in the moment in sort of dismantling any idea that it is okay to speak about her and to her in those terms was important. But I also think a lesson that we as a country are learning and learning again is that the confines of sexism and racism, they actually hurt all of us. So this is not an issue to be concerned about because maybe you have a daughter or a wife or a sister or a mom. This is an issue to be concerned about because our futures are bound up together and because no one will be truly free, as Audre Lorde had said, until we all are. So the many tropes and sexist stereotypes that women are experiencing every single day, when in leadership and when not, it means that we lose talented people. It means that their lives and futures aren't the same, but that means that all of our lives and futures aren't the same. So at the Law Center, I'm clear that our work is not only to push forward the laws and policies that will transform the lives of women and girls, but it is to continue to press and take on these long-standing cultural guards that have made it harder for us every single day.
I think that just stop for a second and say yes. It doesn't get any better than that. One last question. I think, let me just see, we've got a little bit of time left. Someone wrote that it looks like your work at the center is extraordinary, but it doesn't look like it includes domestic violence issues, which are a serious emergency for women nationwide. Do you plan to include this critical element in your future work?
Well, one of the things that I think many of us recognize pretty early on in COVID is that being the recommendation was to stay at home for safety reasons, right? To not transmit the virus. But that safety at home was not safe for everyone. And so we were really glad to partner with organizations both around getting that message out and doing that work going forward. What I would say is that our work does include sexual violence and gender-based violence, but our strategies have largely been ones that really look at the institutional levers for change. So we're thinking a lot about what it looks like for workplaces to be places where people are safe and where survivors have what they need. And the levers in schools and the levers in housing and in healthcare. And one of the things that's really extraordinary is that we actually have some laws and framework to allow us to do that work better. And it was an important part of the survivor agenda. So I would say that we do some of that work. I would also say that we're by far not the organization that's on the ground working on domestic violence. A lot of our partners are doing that work really well. And it's really good to be in community with them too.
That's great. And thank you. We just have a couple of minutes, and I want to bring a powerful and kind of game-changing conversation to a close in two ways. One is just to locate this in a set of conversations we've been having for the last 6 months. And again, your narrative and your voice feels very similar to that of Lema Gbowe, the Nobel Peace Prize winner from Liberia, or Shirin Ebadi from Iran, or Jody Williams from the US, or Tawakkol Karman from Yemen. This sense that you get these breakthroughs, you hold tight, you hold hope and joy. You clearly are a joyful person, and yet it doesn't mean you can't step into the really hard work. So I just want to just thank you for your leadership, and then kind of bring it down to, how do all the people watching you kind of relate? Like, oh my God, she's amazing. I could never do that. So the last book you read and the last song you heard on your, whatever the device is or music.
So, okay, my mother and my sisters and my mother's best friend and her daughter, we have like a weekly call. And the book that we are now in the midst of reading is Cass by Isabel Wilkerson. So I was really excited to see that you guys had her here. I will tell you, it is a tough read.
It's a tough read.
It is a tough read when you do the work that I do as my day job. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, like fits and starts. But you know, I also just will confess, I'm much more of like a beach read person. Something that is so easy. You maybe don't actually need to remember all the characters' names. That is my type of book. So it's also heavier than I would usually do. And I will just say, I've actually been listening to a lot more music recently, just as I'm, getting ready and restoring myself. And I have been winding through all of Janelle Monáe's latest album, which is both fun and smart and really relaxing.
That's great. Fatima, congratulations again. Not that there was ever any doubt, but boy, did you bring the award to life this afternoon, and just so grateful for the substance and the joy of leading change the way you do. It's really a gift to us individually and to the sector, particularly to women and girls of color across this nation. I will say one thing that Tawakol Carmen told us is that the world watches us, whether we like it or not. And how we lead social change gets transmitted out to the world. So know that it isn't just the work every day here in the US. It is inspirational for the women leaders busting through all over the globe. So thank you.
Thank you so much.